Hey everybody. So one thing, this is like a supplemental, I guess, but mostly for the assignment or the lab. Well, both actually. And if you go back to week 4, simple web server using Express.js, and you scroll to the bottom, there's like this section where it says CSS and images, and then it also says public hosting for sale, whatever. This is not covered too much, and I didn't cover it in the lecture, but I'm going to cover it quickly. So up till now, pretty much. We've been working with non-dynamic websites. And what I mean by this is, if you think back to our crappy drawing, right? MS Paint. And we have our client over here and we have our server here, right? And when our client asks for this web page, if you recall, the client isn't sending back HTML, it's just sending back a string, give or take. But stuff is happening on the server first, right? We can manipulate the file, we can insert a database, we can do the login, you can do loops, all sorts of stuff inside of our routes. Whereas up until this point, you know, when you made a homepage like this, you could easily just right click on it and open it with your browser, right? So I could actually just double click on home and I would get this homepage. And if I inserted an image, I could do something like image src equals, here's my SpaceX image, SpaceX WebP, something to this effect, right? And if I refresh my homepage, oops, not that, this one, SpaceX XV. There it is, right? And this would work, but the URL for our image is actually this file, right? Users, Harry Scanlon, documents, projects, Conestoga. Oh, this should be Seneca. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm in a different folder. Views, and then SpaceX.WebP, right? And that's like the direct absolute path to our image. Even though that we're using a relative path here, it still has to come from my directory, right? And if I were to put in that entire field, if I was to put in this entire file name right here, this should still work. Let's see if it does. Right, it still works, but we're not doing that. And I don't have this file on my computer. And also, if I run our server, right, so here's our server, here's a typical node server right here. We'll just get rid of this for a second. Here's my home, whatever, right? So node index.js, listing on 8,000, 8080, right? So I go localhost 8080, here's home, and there's no image. Even though in my home, I have a relative path location. Well, the issue is that there's no route for SpaceX.WebP, right? They cannot get SpaceXW or WebP. So I would, technically have to go back to app.get or to our server or index.js and then make, SpaceX.WebP. And then I can use send file path.join directory name, blah, 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 and send in SpaceX.WebP, right? Because remember I said it doesn't care if it's an HTML file as long as there's a route for it. So I'll resave my program. Let's do nodemon index.js. And if I run this now, I should be able to get the image, which I do, right? Localhost 8080 SpaceX WebP. And my homepage works. Great. But this is pure shite because if I had 100 pages on here, right, with 100 pictures or a million pictures, I'm not going to do a route for each picture, right? So when we do dynamic web pages like this, we have something called a static folder. And everything inside of the static folder is exactly what it is. It's static. It's not going to change. It's not like dynamically created on the fly. And everything in this folder is going to be served by our web server exactly how it is. This web server is not going to touch it. But we have to tell Express that we want to do this and then what folder it is. So you do this by just doing app.use and then express.static and then whatever you want to call the folder. So if I called this whatever, I would go over here. In our main folder, I would call it whatever. But in most 99% cases of web servers, they call it public. Notice my icon even changes. Now, anything I put in this public folder, I can now access in my web server. So I have to actually move this SpaceX WebP over to the public folder. And in fact, typically people would put, it in an images directory, something like this. And then you can also put your CSS in here, right? So we can have a CSS folder, right? So I have public CSS images. Now, again, another common mistake is people will want to do stuff like public slash images slash whatever the image is. But the public that we added here is the folder that contains everything that is public. So you don't actually put the public folder name. A common mistake, right? So refresh. Now think about that. Remember, so everything inside of here is now available. And how this works is that Express will, if I type in SpaceX WebP, images slash SpaceX. What Express is going to do is it's going to check first for a route called images slash SpaceXP, SpaceX.webp. But if it doesn't exist, it will then say, oh, Harry also has a static folder. I'm going to check in there. So it checks in public, and then it will check in the subfolder images and SpaceX. So just keep that in mind because it's very common that I see students be like, my image doesn't work, and they hand me in file whatever, or they hand it in like this, and they don't put in a static folder, and they have their images in their view, and that's completely wrong. So make sure you take a look at that. Again, this is just supplemental. Have a good day.